Sean McDermott says the starters will play a healthy amount in Saturday's preseason game against the Broncos. My thoughts on that and what else you should be watching for is all coming your way today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Thanks for joining me and making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder, we are free and available to you on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Elias. Their app lets you access team and player stats, head-to-head team comparisons. You can give yourself the edge this NFL season. Find Elias Game Plan in the App Store or Play Store today. Well, folks, Sean McDermott let us know the starters they're going to play on Saturday against the Denver Broncos at home, Highmark Stadium. And so I want to share my thoughts on that in addition to what I'm looking for in this football game. We'll go position by position and talk about the number one storyline at each position that I'm going to be dialed into in this game on Saturday against the Denver Broncos. We do have to start with some very, very unfortunate news. Dawson Knox's brother, Luke, he passed away. 22 years old, was a linebacker at FIU, was previously at Ole Miss, where Dawson had played his college football. Sean McDermott commented on it on Thursday morning. He said it was a tough morning. Our hearts go out to Dawson and his family during this time. We're right there with him, supporting him and his family. Tragic news. We love him and support him. Just unfortunate news this morning. A tough way to start the day, but we're all going to do all that we can to be there for him and his family. Kind of a gut punch this morning finding that out, and just knowing Dawson and his story and how tight their family is. It's heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking, and I do trust that this team, this organization, will rally behind the family and truly do what Sean McDermott said there and be there for them and do everything that they can to show their support. And so just really unfortunate news. I do find myself feeling really good about my belief in this Buffalo Bills organization and the players in the locker room and the leadership within the coaching staff and the front office to really be there for Dawson. And so, that's not going to change the circumstances, but it's all about Dawson and his family having the support that they need through this time. And I really do believe that the Bills will be there for him and that he can confide in his teammates and they can help him get through this very, very tragic situation. So let's move on from that and talk about Coach McDermott announcing that the starters are going to play what he said is a healthy amount for them, what he believes is a healthy amount for them. He said most starters, not all, will play, but specifically Josh Allen will play in this game. Coach McDermott was asked what he's looking for out of his players in this game, the starters. He said, just getting in the flow of a regular game, going through warm-ups, getting out there and executing, doing what we've been practicing and the things the staff is emphasizing. Josh Allen will be hearing a new voice in his ear. There is a lot that we want to put into a game that we've been practicing. So that's Sean McDermott's kind of his answer, his justification for this. Now, obviously, this news was met with a lot of nervousness, kind of just navigating social media right after Coach McDermott shared this in his press conference on Thursday morning. A lot of people are nervous. People are nervous that Bills players, important Bills players, can get injured in a meaningless game. Now, I recognize the risk. I really do. But these are football players. They play football. And if you want to play football at a high level when it counts, then being prepared matters. Being the most prepared that you can be matters. Folks, I'm nervous every single day about injuries, whether it's practice, it's preseason, or the regular season. I'm nervous about them. I legitimately feel a sense of relief every day when I know the Bills are done practicing and there's no injuries reported. And heck, you don't even know. It could be the middle of July and players are not even at the facility and you can find out that a player gets injured. That happened to the Bills. Kiko Alonso. Remember? You're all excited about Kiko Alonso year 2? It's the middle of July. Players aren't even around. Tears his ACL. This stuff can happen. It's easy to say the starter shouldn't play, and then someone goes and gets hurt, and then you can come back and say, well, I told you so. They shouldn't have had him play. It's a meaningless game. But what I would want to challenge people who say that or are ready to do that is to take a little bit more of a nuanced approach and admit that these players would benefit from having the game reps before they count for real because they're going to be better prepared to execute when it does matter. So yeah, it's a meaningless game in that the results don't matter, but it's not meaningless in terms of how it prepares the team for when it does matter. If a guy gets hurt in practice, do we say things like, this guy was hurt in a meaningless practice? Or do we recognize the value in practicing and accept it that it just sucks if a guy gets hurt? That's where I'm at with it. Fingers will be crossed, but the value in playing is obvious. Now let's hope I come back to you after the game in our post-game discussion without any significant injuries to discuss, just like I feel after every practice, every preseason game, and of course, every regular season game. If you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when unexpected expenses come up. Now, Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that I'm stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest and no credit check needed, and millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Future you will thank you. All right, so let's talk about the one thing at each position that I'm going to be dialed into, the biggest storyline, what I'm going to be focusing in on for this game against the Broncos on Saturday at home, Highmark Stadium. Let's start with the defensive side of the football. I think we always start with the offense. Let's start with defense at defensive tackle. You know, we talk about this very established top four with Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Jordan Phillips, and Tim Settle. I think that's a very established top four. Well, now the next four is where I get really interested. Because you have some players here in Eli Ankou and Brandon Bryant that have been around, right? They've been practice squad players. They've gotten called up and played in games. You feel pretty good about them as practice squad defensive tackles. Well, meanwhile, you got a couple guys here beyond them in Prince Emili and CJ Brewer that played a ton against the Colts. They both logged over 50 snaps in the game. And so what I'm interested in is learning a little bit more about them and seeing if they can actually challenge either Eli Ankou or Brandon Bryant for practice squad roles. If the Bills are going to commit 2 spots on their practice squad to defensive tackles, will it for sure be Ankou and Brandon Bryant? Or does Prince Emili and CJ Brewer do enough here to make that a more interesting conversation? So that's what I'm focused in on at defensive tackle. At defensive end, I'm looking at my notes. I've got one name written down. Shaq Lawson. Shaq Lawson. I think he's the defensive end 5 right now. I think he's firmly behind Miller, Rousseau, Epinesa, and Basham. The Bills signed him to like a 1-year veteran minimum type deal. So he's a first-round pick by the Bills. Winds up being a reasonable rotational player. Parlays that into signing a $10 million a year contract with the Dolphins. Has a pretty good season there this first year. But then he's traded to the Texans. Was he traded or cut? He got to the Jets somehow and then didn't finish the season on the Jets and was on the street towards the end of last season. And then he signs with the Bills for a 1-year veteran minimum type deal. You kind of wonder here, just what's the traction? What does the NFL think of Shaq Lawson? Well, last year he went through the Dolphins, the Texans, and the Jets, 3 teams that you feel like would like to have a player like him. And then the only opportunity that it seems like he would have is coming back to Buffalo on a minimum contract this offseason. So where is Shaq Lawson at? Is he the guy that the Bills should keep on their roster and be a game day inactive as the 5th defensive end? Or does Mike Love have something to say about that? I'm just trying to gauge where Shaq's at. And I don't know that through 2 days of practice that I watched last week in the Colts game that I feel super confident in saying that this is for sure the defensive end 5 for this football team. It might be, but in terms of something I'm dialed into regarding this defensive end room, it's seeing what Shaq Lawson has to offer. And then, of course, measuring that up to what we see from A.J. Epinesa and Boogie Basham. Let's go to linebacker. I really want to see Tyrel Dodson play. He's a really interesting player to me, and he's been around. And unfortunately, I didn't get to see him play at all last week. He was held out of both practices and, of course, the game. And there's a belief in my mind that he could be Tremaine Edmonds' primary backup. And then from there, if the Bills go 3 linebackers, who's on the field? Is it Terrell Bernard? Is it Tyrel Dodson? I'm really interested in finding this out. So I just want to see Tyrel Dodson play so I can continue to become more familiar with him as a player, especially if he is going to be a very meaningful backup. But also, if they are going to play the starters and we're going to see some more base 4-3 defense, who's the guy on the field next to Edmonds and Milano, assuming those guys play? I think that's what I'm really curious about when it comes to the Bills linebackers. At cornerback. So if Dane Jackson is one of the starters, right, and he was held out of last week, and he's one of the guys that's going to start and play this week, and we heard what Leslie Frazier said this week in that Dane's ahead of Kyer Elam and Christian Benford. And that's a signal to me that if Trey White was healthy right now, that the starting corners would be Dane Jackson and Trey White. Well, who gets that first rep opposite of Dane Jackson on Saturday against Denver? Is it Dane Jackson and Kyer Elam? Or is it Dane Jackson and Christian Benford? That's going to be fascinating to learn. We're gonna find out at this point in the process between Kyer Elam and Christian Benford which one is a little bit higher up right now, which one's ahead. A little glimpse as to what this Bills starting defense could look like against the Rams in now 20 days, literally 20 days from, if you're listening to this on Friday the 19th, 20 days away from the Bills taking on the Rams to start the 2022 NFL season. Who's starting opposite of Dane Jackson? We're going to get a little bit of a clue on who's ahead on Saturday, assuming Dane Jackson plays. Now, I'd bet that they're going to rotate those 2 guys in, right? You could see maybe the defense plays 4 series. The first and third series are with Kyer Elam. The second and fourth are with Christian Benford. But I still think that there's a lot of merit to which one's on the field first. And when I was at practice Wednesday and Thursday of last week, on Wednesday, Benford was the guy up first. On Thursday, it was Kyer Elam. So this is a really real competition. At safety, this is a one-name situation as well. Nick McLeod. I think with the emergence of Christian Benford, the Bills have kind of pushed Nick McCloud to permanently at safety. And I'm interested to see how that goes. He played a lot of reps against the Colts. And Leslie Frazier said that, look, Nick McCloud's chances of making this team will be defined by the physicality that he shows in games. So, of course, I'm going to be dialed into that. And we look at Denver as a team, or at least I do, that's going to want to run the football, just kind of based on the offensive line that they have, Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, some more depth there. You know, I think Denver as a team playing at Mile High Stadium in Denver, like, they're always going to be at their best when they're able to run the football because of that altitude and the stress that it puts on teams. And, you know, if you can run the ball, you can really kind of take a team's will, especially late. So I think any good coach in Denver is always going to want to prioritize pounding the rock. And so I say all that to say that Nick McCloud should get plenty of chances to be physical and play downhill, in addition to some good matchups against tight ends and deep alignments. We're going to learn some things about Nick McCloud in this football game. I'm going to be dialed in on him because I think this is another position, just like defensive tackle, where the top four are very, very set. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Jaquan Johnson, DeMar Hamlin, and then it's like Josh Thomas and Nick McCloud. All right, well, what does Nick McCloud look like here? I think that's going to be a fascinating thing to find out. We'll go ahead and tie in special teams here. Of course, I'm interested in who the returners are. You know, is this a Khalil Shakir punt returner, James Cook kick returner situation? That's what it was last week, at least kind of initially. What does that look like? Who gets those opportunities? And then, of course, the punter situation. You know, Matt Hawk hadn't been cut yet, and the Bills have to cut 5 more players after this game, and maybe he'll be among those guys, but he's still here. And so I'm interested in seeing what opportunity he gets. If I'm the Bills, I want to see as much of Matt Araiza as I possibly can, both punting and holding. So I wouldn't take a rep away from Matt Araiza to give it to Matt Hawk. So if that seems so obvious to me, why is he still around? What's the appeal here? That's a fascinating component of this game. And if Matt Hawk gets run, then that'll tell us a little bit more about the reservations that the Bills might have in Matt Araiza. Or they just want to make sure they give Matt Hawk a fair opportunity. There's a lot. You could talk yourself into a lot here, but I am curious to see who gets what opportunity in this game between Matt Araiza and Matt Hawk. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Life is full of twists and turns, and it's important to show up for yourself through it all. BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. We've all had situations in life where we need someone to talk to and I encourage everyone to be open to therapy. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. You can log into your account at any time and send a message to your therapist. You can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, so you don't have to be on camera if you don't want to. And getting therapy every week is as easy as a few clicks on your laptop or phone. I love looking through all the reviews. Just recently, I read a review from a BetterHelp user who had issues concerning stress, anxiety, depression, self-esteem, trauma, and abuse, and even ADHD. And they said this about Willie Whited, who is one of the therapists over at BetterHelp. They said, Willie is an excellent listener. He provides sound counsel and is a wonderful sounding board. I appreciate someone helping me understand how I feel and in developing healthy coping strategies. Folks, they have a special offer for my listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/lockedon. All right, let's close this thing out by talking about the offensive positions and the things that I'm dialed into, of course, regarding the Bills versus Broncos, Highmark Stadium, Saturday, 1 o'clock. At quarterback, well, I guess this Josh Allen guy is going to play. I certainly want to see Josh play well. I'm always interested in everything Josh Allen's doing, so I'm not really going to spend a whole lot of time there. I want to see Case Keenum, right? I want to see Case Keenum in a better scenario for him to showcase himself. I want to see him with, you know, kind of the backups that the Bills have going up against backups that Denver has, and see if the offense looks better than it did against the Colts, if there's a little bit more confidence in the way that Case approaches the game. Again, I'm going to point to the sample size that's much larger that exists throughout Case Keenum's NFL career and care a whole lot more about that than what he looked with the Bills backups against the Colts starters. But I do want to come out of this game with a better feel for Case Keenum with this Bills team and running this Bills offense. At running back, if we're going to see the Bills' first team offense, which I think is a big reason why the starters are going to play, it's a new offensive coordinator, a new voice in Josh's ear, a lot of newness on the offensive side of the football. So I think the biggest reason why they're going to play is that. And so with that in mind, at running back, I want to see the utilization of these running backs with the starters. I anticipate Devin Singletary's the starter, but how and when does Zach Moss work into this? What about James Cook? Are we going to get a little bit of a snapshot of how this running back rotation is going to look during the regular season? And, Zach Moss was kind of the starter last week. He played well. He flashed. It sounds like he's had a really good offseason. He's healthy. Is he really going to eat into this Devin Singletary, James Cook situation? I want to get all the clues that we can because I'm fascinated to see how this all plays out. Now, of course, second half, let's get all the Raheem Blackshear that we can get. Like, that was so fun last week. But as far as the starters go, I want to see how Zach Moss especially incorporates into the rotation. Wide receiver, I feel very similar to the wide receiver position based on, compared to what I just said about running backs. What is the wide receiver utilization when Josh Allen's on the field? Does Jamison Crowder get reps with Josh Allen in this game with the first team offense? Does Isaiah Hodgins get reps with Josh Allen on the field when it's first team offense? What about Jay Kumaro? I just feel like there's a lot to unpack here. And, I was at camp for a couple days and the personnel groupings were just all over the place. I saw some plays where the Bills had 4 receivers on the field and it was Crowder, it was McKenzie, it was Shakir, and it was Tanner Genry. I mean, I'm serious. There was just so many different combinations that they've tried. And so you feel like game reps where you're trying to get ready for a season is where you're going to have the most revealing reps to give you the best clues about what this is going to look like come the regular season. But, I still think they're sorting it out. And so I'm anxious to see what those combinations look like. At tight end, I think there's a legit battle for tight end 3, Tommy Sweeney versus Quentin Morris. I think you have a pretty secure 1-2 in Knox and Howard. Howard, a good blocker. And if Howard's a good blocker and your tight end 3, what do you value the most? To me, it's receiving upside because I can use an offensive lineman as kind of a jumbo tight end. I could put Tommy Doyle or David Questenberry at tight end to get the blocking component. I would want the pass catching upside. So I'm curious about Quentin Morris. I really am. I think it's probably Tommy Sweeney's job to lose just based on a little bit more experience, having a presence with the team, right? You could tell that he's respected by his teammates and by the coaching staff. But I don't think that Quentin Morris is going away without a fight here. And he certainly provides a lot more upside in the passing game than Tommy Sweeney in my mind. At offensive line, I think the Bills have 8 spots pretty well locked up right now. Your 5 starters, Dawkins, Saffold, Morse, Bates, Spencer Brown. I think that's obvious. I think David Questenberry is obvious. I think Greg Manns is obvious. I think Tommy Doyle is obvious. I think you have 8 spots that are pretty well locked up, meaning you have 1 more left for this active roster. And I think there's 3 players that are in the running to get this job. And probably 2 of these you guys aren't going to like, but I think Bobby Hart, Cody Ford, and Greg Van Roten are absolutely in the mix to be the Bills' 9th offensive lineman. Greg Van Roten got a chance to start that Colts game at center. That was meaningful. He also could play guard. So he's a 3-hole backup. You have Cody Ford, who can play either guard spot and maybe right tackle. And you have Bobby Hart, who I guess he can play both tackle spots in addition to both guard spots. So There's versatility here with a number of these guys. And I think those three guys, Cody Ford, Bobby Hart, Greg Van Roten, are competing for one spot. And I think these games are going to sort that out. So I'm dialed in on watching those players and see what they do. All right, folks, there you have it. That's what I'm looking for in this football game. I shared my thoughts on the starters playing and then what I'm looking for at each position. So now we just got to get to kickoff 1 o'clock, Highmark Stadium, Bills Broncos. And then, of course, after the game, I'll do my post-game podcast. So within a couple hours of the conclusion of the game, you can be looking for that on YouTube and, of course, all the podcasting platforms. So don't miss it. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch up with you after Bills and Broncos.